Hello and welcome in everybody to a new edition of Roll Pod. Thank you guys for bearing with us over the month of July. A couple things squared away, but we're ready to get rolling with full coverage. Fall camp squarely underway in Tuscaloosa. Kalen DeBoer and his staff in year two just wrapped up practice number 5 of the fall. I believe it was. We're recording this on Tuesday afternoon, 25 days away from the season opener in Tallahassee against Florida State. So a lot to cover, a lot to get into, and it should be an exciting time over the next couple of weeks getting into the season opener. We'll go ahead and we'll just go right into it. We'll start with Mike. Just kind of your biggest takeaway from what Kalen DeBoer and what he's kind of been saying over these last couple of days. I know you guys have had some opportunities to speak with him over fall practice. So what's kind of your biggest takeaway here?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's glad to have you on Roll Pod, Brett. I know, there's been a change in terms of the host, going from Cody to Brett, but we don't bite, and hopefully we treat you well having you as the host of our esteemed show. So we're glad.
Yeah, I watched a lot of the film of the back. I kind of know the do's and the don'ts to make sure you guys don't bite back. So I hope it's a smooth transition.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, it's been a busy week. About as busy as a week as I can remember covering the team, just because there's been a good deal of opportunities for us to watch practice, which was not the case, over the final couple of years of the Nick Saban era. We've had 5 practices now, and we've got to watch parts of all 5 of them. And we've had even a media day with players, with say more players than what we typically would have had in the past to speak to. So it's been a lot of access, as we like to say in our business, and Kalen DeBoer has been part of that. And it's been, I think, the general message, whether it's been from Kalen or the players or the coordinators, is they were obviously kind of pushing the idea of how things are different this year. You don't want to say that things are going to be the same as last year, because obviously a lot of people weren't happy with last year. So there's kind of the idea of coming into the offseason with how do you fix it. And I don't know if it was as much Kalen setting that tone, because the first person who gets their hands on players in the offseason is Dave Ballou, the strength coach, because of the fourth quarter program. So it was really Dave Ballou, I think, sent that message, but it's been echoed by players and DeBoer as well, that, and it's always very careful the way they phrase it. It's always like, we weren't slacking last year, but we're taking it to a whole new level this year. And that's been the consistent theme really throughout the offseason. And that's obviously continued into fall camp. And players seem to have received that well, to have embraced that. We'll have to see what that means in the field, but it does seem from what they've said and kind of what the general vibe is, that there is a renewed focus, which I think a lot of people want to hear. So, Kalen's been part of that message, but his theme, and I think Damani Jackson mentioned this on media day, had a meeting with players talking about the critical moments is something that Kalen DeBoer keeps bringing up again and again, because he doesn't think they were all that far off last year. They had a couple 1-score games that they lost, and obviously changed their fate in terms of the playoff. And if they can be better in those critical moments, the little things add up, and that changes the outcome of the season. So there's been little things here and there, but I think the general vibe is, here's why things are different. Here's how we've ratcheted things up, and here's how we've tightened up certain areas. And, that's just time to see it on the field at this point.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
I would say their biggest strength is their continuity, because you've retained a coaching staff 99% of it. You've retained your roster, spring transfer portal window, 100% of it. But the tone is different. The message is different. The intensity part of it's different. And you referenced Dave Ballou. and he spends more time with any player, any coach with players during the offseason. He told me the first thing he told them to start their program was, "This is how we're going to do it. If you don't like it, leave." Like, it's that simple now. Because last year they were, for better or for worse, stuck in a retention phase where their number one priority was keeping people in the building. Um, so you give up something when you do that. It's hard to be as hard edged, however you want to put it. That's been the term that's been thrown around, as you want to be when that's your main goal. Because if you don't have guys to play, you're not going to win anything. So turning up the heat on that, and coaches, players, the interactions just feel different. And I think the Baloo hit something on the head when we spoke the other day. Is it's not just that people are confronting one another; it's that they're accepting it. Like, hey, you just chewed me out, but they're like, it's cool. Like, we can learn from this, because that's what the best teams do. The best teams have really strong leadership and can carry the weaker players on the team along with them. So that's the biggest picture of big picture as it gets. And will words translate into action? We'll have to see, but you have to like what you're hearing, especially if you saw those cracks and those things that kind of took place a year ago.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point there. You mentioned kind of all the continuity there and the staff all coming back. One new name is Ryan Grubb, and you guys got to hear from him. And it's funny, I was talking to Keelan Russell's mom in the summer after they kind of named Ty Simpson the starter if it was game day, which they've done I think like 3 more times, which whatever. But she talked about it like he came in and it was like a very sudden change. Like, we're not doing TikToks. We're tucking your shirts, all those things you were hearing about. Ryan Grubb, when he first came in, kind of like laid down the law. And Keelan Russell's mother, she brought up like not exactly like Nick Saban, but certain things. And I think maybe you guys have, just been talking with him. There's a certain attitude there with him that he brings from the NFL and the way he carries things as well that I think kind of trickles down to the players as well, to what your point, kind of the focus. And which brings me to that next point. You guys did get a chance to hear from Ryan Grubb. I believe he said he want to name a starting quarterback yesterday. So in my mind, why not do it? Alex, we'll kind of start with you there.
Why not do it? Because the guy hasn't won it yet. And you can be optimistic about that and say it's fine, it's early. Ty's in the driver's seat. He hasn't lost a step. But I think the longer this goes, there's some anxiety that builds. It says, why hasn't he won it? So I think it's still too early to freak out about it. I don't think anybody should do that. But if we get a scrimmage and we get 2 scrimmages under our belt and it's not abundantly clear that Ty's the guy, I think that's when the anxiety kicks in. I think that's the thing that Grubb and DeBoer have sort of talked around in bits and pieces, which is, look, he's the guy if we have to play a game tomorrow, but he needs to just finish it. He needs to make it obvious. It needs to be consistent every single day. You're the guy. And, we've seen Ty through his development. We've seen him look really good. We've seen him look really bad. We've seen him been in opportunities where maybe he should take advantage and he didn't. Can he do that now? That's my biggest question mark. Is can he just take the thing? Because it seems like they want him to. You wouldn't say all these things if you didn't want him to, but there's some missing piece there where it's just consistently doing it or just being obviously the guy, and he's got to close that gap.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because, I've covered quarterback competitions before in the NFL, even at Alabama, I guess, Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson a couple years ago. And there's been this dynamic before. Like, you have whether it's a first-round pick in the NFL coming in, or in this case, a 5-star freshman, and then you have a veteran who's kind of been around, but like, you're not quite sure, is he good enough? Like, the ingredients I've seen before, and they're not uncommon ingredients in a quarterback competition. And I think the persistent reality is that eventually that more talented, younger player is going to see the field. And it's always a question of when. And I think it's more about when that player is ready. So to me, it's less about Ty and more about Keelan. And yes, I think they want Ty to just take the bull by the horns and leave no doubt and be that guy that they can trust and rely upon this year. I'm not sure he's fully done that yet, because I think if he did, then you would just say, all right, it's Ty's job right now. But it's still, you went out and got Keelan. Like, Ty Simpson is not Kalen DeBoer's quarterback. He's not the guy he recruited. He's not Ryan Grubb's quarterback. Keelan Russell is really what unlocks, I think, a successful future for Kalen DeBoer at Alabama more than Ty Simpson. So he's the guy that Grubb didn't recruit Keelan, but DeBoer did and Nick Sheridan did. So when Keelan Russell's ready, it's going to be hard to keep him off the field. And I think it's keeping an eye on where he's at in his development. And Grubb did give a little bit of a hint today, talking about some of the speed bumps that the younger quarterbacks had. And that's both Russell and Austin Mack early in camp, and then kind of cleaning it up the last couple of days. But I don't think there's any hesitancy from this coaching staff to play a freshman quarterback. I don't think they want to do that week one, Florida State, that environment, on the road. Like, I don't think that's ideal. But I don't think they're also looking at it as like, we want Ty to be the starter. We want Keelan Russell to sit on the bench and do nothing all season. Like, this is a competition. And if it wasn't a competition, they would have ended it by now. They would have publicly come out and said, all right, Ty's our guy, let's move on. So you still kind of have to keep in the back of your mind what's going on with Keelan, and watch his development as much as you're watching Ty trying to solidify what he can do.
Good.
All signs still point to Ty Simpson being the starting quarterback week one, but some of it is out of his hands. If Keelan Russell takes the job and shows that he's the best prospect to ever commit to Alabama in the history of our recruiting rankings, I don't know if Ty is good enough to hold that back. So it's just a matter of when that happens for Keelan. When does that come along to a point where you're like, we need to put that on the field? Because look, that happened with Tua. There was a point with Tua where you're like, he's better than Jalen Hurts. And you saw a little bit more of him, and eventually look at the end of that season. So I don't know if it's as much about Ty as it is Keelan, but we'll have to see.
I think that's pretty spot on. You talk about Keelan there, because it does seem like there's a general consensus that, it's Ty's job to lose, that Keelan is the most talented quarterback in that room. And like you said, unlocks the program as well. So 5 stars don't sit, but again, you have to kind of be careful with it. I don't know, throwing him in a game in Tallahassee and he throws an interception, and that could be the end of the Alabama career. I mean, in this day and age with college football, it's very, very eggshelly. So it's going to be, like you said, it's going to be interesting.
And Alex and I have talked about it. I think that's what he's going to say, is like, it's easier to go from Ty to Keelan than it is Keelan to Ty, probably.
Well, the other thing I was going to say is, you don't have to parse a lot of language to know that the quarterbacks are viewed through two very different lenses. When they talk about Keelan, they get really excited because he can do things on a football field that a lot of quarterbacks can't do. That's not a knock on Ty. If that's a knock on anyone, it's like the entire country, because he can make throws that don't appear to be there. That's just how he is. He's got that ability. And Ty, on the other hand, you're talking about consistency. And Kalen Moore talked about having the gimmies, where you're consistently hitting a guy on a 5-yard route, and he can turn that 5-yard route into 8, 9, 10, 15, 20 yards. So do you go with the steadier guy or the guy with the higher upside? I think that's kind of going to be the push-pull of it. The thing that influences that decision, I think, will be how the receivers can play, because if you have Ryan Williams and you have Jeremy Bernard and you have Isaiah Horton, and you're consistently throwing 5-yard passes and you're not throwing interceptions, you're going to have a lot of success. So do they need a Keelan Russell to come in and be a difference maker like that? Or is Ty being a guy, I don't like the term game manager because it sounds like an insult and it's actually not, but can that be good enough for this year? I'm very curious to see. And then in the back of my head, because there's a million thoughts going on at once, is Kalen DeBoer saying on, I think it was Tide 99.1, we don't want a guy who's just facilitating.
Right.
We need a guy who makes plays. Yep. So you put all these things in a pot, and the experience part of it, who was recruited by whom, it's very interesting to where, yes, Ty is 95% the guy right now. But I'm not ruling out Keelan. I'm probably not ruling him out until we get a few games into the season.
Right. And I think if there's probably value to going to Ty on the road, not only Florida State, but maybe even Georgia as well. If things go well for Florida State, Louisiana, Monroe, Wisconsin, then obviously Ty starts at Georgia. But you open that box, like you see what's inside the box. You see what Ty Simpson is. Like I think there's some people just need to see it. Like, what is it? Like we spent 3 years, like we don't know what Ty Simpson is. So there's probably some value to like, here's what it is. And if it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. And everybody sees it. Everybody knows. And if it is bad or not great or something that's not winning games early in the year, then you have Keelan to go to. So there's an argument to be made, like just see what Ty Simpson is. And you're not married to a decision. Look at 2 years ago. You weren't married to Jalen Milroe being your starter. You said, hey, you're the starter for whoever they played, Middle Tennessee, I think that year.
Yeah.
Start. And you're the starter for the Texas game. And you threw 2 picks against Texas and we lost. So you're not the starter against South Florida. And you're back to the starter. So you don't have to. And that season, they came a 4th down conversion away from going to the national championship game. The Blake Corum one, the Michigan one. So you can mess around with it a little bit. I don't know if you're whoever you name the starter. And if you're talking timing, it's probably going to happen within the next 2 weeks is what I think we would expect. You kind of get through these 2 scrimmages. After that, you're really moving into game prep for Florida State. And I think you need to know who your starter is by then. So these next 2 weeks, I'd expect a starter after that. And, it doesn't lock anything in stone. And I don't think there is the old school mentality of you just sit a freshman. I don't think that exists for this staff. We saw it with Ryan Williams last year. Quarterback's a different animal, but you're paying a guy. Like you're paying Keelan Russell to be here. You're not just going to waste a year of eligibility and say, we're not going to play him at all. Like if he's good, you put him on the field. And he's the guy that they recruited. So again, I've seen quarterback competitions, quarterback battles play out before. And I don't say sooner rather than later, but there's always kind of that eventuality of the guy that you brought in is going to be the guy at some point. It's just a question to me of when is Keelan ready to do that? And it's a little bit less a question of Ty to me.
Yeah, well, it'll certainly be a big topic we hit on for many podcasts until they do name one and beyond. Kind of just sticking on that side of the ball. Obviously, quarterback is the biggest question mark for good reason. You guys mentioned wide receivers. There's a running back transfer, Jalen Washington. Just kind of from what you guys have seen on offense, maybe at practice, what you've heard, what's kind of maybe your biggest takeaway, whether it be on the offensive line, at the tight end position, because that's kind of been completely renovated, if you will. Alex, kind of just, is it running backs, is it receivers? Where are you at?
It's offensive line and it's guard. And before I would have told you it's left guard. It's the only one to worry about. And now it's like, well, it's both guard spots because it's been 2 practices now that we've seen Jaden Roberts working with the twos. And does that mean something? I don't know. I really like Jaden Roberts' potential. He's a freaky athlete who's freaky strong, but has not quite realized his potential. Do they look at a trio of Cam Dewberry, Geno Vandemark, and Jaden Roberts and just decide there's not enough separation between any of those 3? Let's play them and see how it goes early in the season. I don't know if that's in the cards. I think maybe it potentially is. I think to me that's one of the bigger unanswered questions. And I know people are going to focus on Wilkin Formby, and Wilkin Formby is a big deal at right tackle. The reason I don't spend as much time worrying about Wilkin Formby because there's not really somebody else behind him pushing him. He's going to be what he's going to be. I think it's going to be pretty good, or at least good enough. But to me, one of the storylines I wasn't necessarily expecting was the guard spot and how that will shake out with those 3 guys. A big Geno guy, I think Mike is as well. But the offensive line is certainly up there as the thing I'm looking at because, look, it goes without saying, the potential of the group is enormous. They could be one of the best in the country. And I think with a new quarterback and what they have at receiver, they really need to realize that potential for this offense to succeed at a really high level.
And I might be a Geno guy, but who really I think is a Geno guy is Chris Kapilovic, the offensive line coach, because that was that was Geno's coach at Michigan State. And you come along and you go to Alabama, you follow him, and then not only that, you stay for your 5th year when maybe you had a chance to go somewhere else. And I just think that's a good marriage, and it makes sense. And even though Cam Dewberry's bigger and stronger probably than Geno, and even though Jaden Roberts is athletically, more accomplished than Geno, if you know what you're doing out there and you're technically sound and you're doing what the offensive line coach wants you to do, and you kind of know his system, that tends to get guys on the field.
Yeah.
And look, I think at the end of the day, it's probably going to be a position like last year where they do a lot of rotation. I don't know if your schedule's quite as that opening on the road where you're trying to communicate and have consistent, if there's crowd noise at Florida State, you don't have that extra group of 5 game to play. You only have that Louisiana Monroe, and then you got Wisconsin at home, and then you're on the road at Georgia. Like, I don't know if you want to be mixing and matching different offensive line combinations in some of those games as compared to, some of the cupcake games that they've had in the past in September, but that's probably what we're going to see. And I would agree. Like, I don't know if Jaden Roberts being on the second team 2 practices in a row is a big deal. I don't know if it's something, but I don't think it's nothing either. Like, I think there's intentionality behind those sorts of things. So yeah, that to me is probably the biggest takeaway from the last couple of days, the first week of camp here.
Yeah.
Tight end is intriguing, but it's just hard to know where they are right now because the fact that you still have Josh Cuevas and Daniel Lewis coming back from injury.
Yeah.
You don't know, frankly, who plays, a traditional inline tight end versus who's going to be the guy who kind of is that hybrid with Rob Utes. Or are they even going to run as much 2 tight end sets because of what they have at receiver on top of that? I think we're a ways from figuring out exactly what that position is going to look like.
Yeah, and I think you could probably make arguments on the defensive side of the ball. There's some positions that are up for grabs. Husky, I feel like one that you guys continue to kind of harp on and read about. Just kind of on the defense as a whole, kind of similar question. What's maybe your biggest takeaway, question mark, or emerging question, trend, however you want to put it, kind of just on the defensive side of the ball? Whoever wants to take it will go. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll take it. No, I think the transfers coming in on defense, I'm still wondering where they're going to play because there's a lot of returning veterans, a lot of returning experience. And yes, I think you still have to see where Deontay Lawson is. And we saw him at Media Day kind of walking around, and to my eye, just doesn't seem like he's quite right yet, just in his gait. I don't want to overanalyze that, but sometimes you can just tell like the guy's still kind of working back. Obviously, he's wearing a brace on the field. And then there's the mental aspect, too, of playing inside linebacker. And you got guys running across you and diving at your legs and, 300-pound linemen coming at you. Like, there's a mental hurdle to overcome there. We saw it with Dylan Moses playing that position after his injury. Like, that was a lot for him. So I want to see that. I want to see Keon Sabb come back from his injury. But you feel good about kind of the returners, and you write down the list: Overton, James Smith, Tim Keenan, Lawson, Jefferson, Rousseau, Damani Jackson, Zabian Brown, Keon Sabb, Bray Hubbard. Like, there's a lot of returners. To me, it's like, where do those new pieces fit? Even the freshmen, like I think Dijon Lee has a chance to get on the field. It's going to be tough for him to. He's not going to start at corner, but how many snaps does he play is a question. But those incoming transfers, Cam Calhoun, I think would have been my choice as third corner, but I think Dijon Lee could make that job just coming in as a freshman. So it seems like they're trying him at Husky, but then you have Deshaun Jones coming back at Husky and Drake Kirkpatrick, who's coming up. And, inside linebacker, you have Nakai Hill-Green, who they brought in at the time, probably thinking he would start because you didn't think Justin Jefferson would be back. You didn't think Deontay Lawson would be back. Well, both of them are. And kind of where's Nakai Hill-Green? What's his role? Kelby Collins coming in from Florida. I think at first they thought maybe Bandit, kind of play him on the edge. That's where he seemed to excel as a freshman at Florida. And that doesn't seem to be happening right now. It seems like it's more the interior. That's where he was by the end of the spring. That's where he's been every day that we've seen him at practice. But you have Keenan Smith, Edric Hill, who's been a little bit banged up, I think, and Jeremiah Beeman. So where does Kobe Collins play? So those new transfers, like, I think there's some potential for all of them. It's just I don't know if they're going to play as big of a role as I would have said on the day that they committed. But that is partly a commentary on just how many guys you got back, which probably wasn't as, or it probably was more than you would have expected at that time of the year back in December.
Ultimately, you're talking about depth, and depth is vital in the SEC. My biggest question is not about that. It's who can be a star, because you can have all these returning guys, and it's really good to have. Don't get me wrong, 7, 8 returning starters, a bunch of guys who maybe could have gone to the NFL, a bunch of guys who are preseason All SEC. Who's going to be an All-American? Because that's what makes a really good defense, is a guy who can just wreck plays. Can LT Overton close the gap between a guy with 39 pressures and only 2 sacks? Can you get to double-digit sacks? Can Quay Russo be a guy who gets to the quarterback? Because everything you watch says he should be able to do that, but he didn't really do that last year. Can James Smith be a guy who emerges after being the third guy in the rotation in the interior defensive line in limited action, even though he played quite a bit off the bench? He wasn't a starter. There were spurts where he looked really good. Can he turn the corner? He says he's ready. He had a great offseason. Dave Ballou, A+. Did great. Can he do that and become an All-American type player? I think that, to me, is what will take Alabama from good, which is what we saw the second half of last season. Sort of set aside the Oklahoma game. I thought they were pretty good and found their way. But they need guys who are going to be special, first-round pick kind of guys. And there are a few guys, I've already mentioned, who already have that capability, but you need to see them do that, because just having depth, just having good returning players is not good enough in this league. You have really special players. And I think there's pieces there. Keon Sabb is another one, too. Bray Hubbard is another one. Xavier Brown, I think, could be the best cornerback on this team. People talk about Damani Jackson. Xavier Brown's a stud. But you need to see it. And I'm very curious when we go into week 1, week 2, who sort of emerges as the guys they can count on to make plays.
Yeah, I think just real quick on a Xavier Brown tangent, just having covered him, kind of figured how good he was going to be and what he did, and then for him to not be on any preseason ranking, I think Alex had his kind of displayed his displeasure with that after he started 13 games in the SEC and had 4 picks or whatever it was. So
the numbers are better. The advanced numbers are better than Damani.
Right.
And, I mean, I get it. There were more people went after Xavier than went after Damani. Damani is a bigger name, came from USC. That kid did more than hold his own. And I think that Georgia game was just a microcosm of everything, where you take your lumps early as a freshman, and then at the end, talent wins out, and you make a play. So the ability is there with a number of guys. But I think, again, maybe the preseason SEC poll did that defense a favor by saying, you guys are good, but you're not great yet. I think that's where they got to get to.
Yeah.
Because no first-team guys, I think, was a little bit shot across the bow.
Yeah, and I think, kind of just to put a bow on today, I think we're going to try to do a little bit of shorter shows for you guys, kind of in the 30 to 40-minute range, anywhere between 25, 40 minutes. I think kind of we get a smile out of Mike here. Kind of special teams. I know that's something that we've always talked about, and Kalen DeBoer's talked about it a bunch. They're replacing all 3. They've mentioned it seems like some guys are continually being brought up. You had a nice piece on Connor Talty. I think the other side of it, too, is who's returning punts and kicks. There's a lot of options, like you guys have said, across the board. Kind of just if you can, share some thoughts on, it's an important part of the game.
Yeah, no, I talked to Talty yesterday, not John, but Connor, and our esteemed CBS colleague, John Talty. And first of all, for him to talk, I think is a statement of itself. There's a difference between the Saban ear and the DeBoer ear there, but just there's always like a mental thing with kickers. Like sometimes teams don't want them to talk because it gets in their head. Like, here's the media, here's I'm standing out there in front of them, and teams overthink it sometimes. And I think Talty did a great job talking to us, and really interesting kid, coming from Chicago to Alabama, and has had some bumps in the road, so to speak, the last couple of years where he came in thinking Will Reichard was going to go to the NFL, and Reichard came back, and he spent a year behind him and then got hurt that offseason. And then they brought in Graham Nicholson, and you could tell that, bugged him a little bit, but kind of stuck around, and now he has his chance. And from everything that Jay Nunez has said and Kalen DeBoer has said, and even Talty himself, like, he's in a much better spot right now than he was a year ago. And there seems to be a good deal of confidence in him. With that said, I asked him, like, how do you simulate what you're going to face at Florida State? And he stopped me before I even finished my question and said, I can't. You don't. There's no way. So you don't know until you know with the kicker, until he's lining up to make that kick, and whatever is going on around him, he has to block out, whether it's Florida State, whether it's Georgia, whether it's Missouri, whether it's the last school that they play every year. And there's been, kicking situations down there. You don't know until it happens. So that's kind of the interesting part with him. But punter seems a little bit more like they're trying to figure out how to go from James Burnup, who was one of the best in the country last year, and Blake Dowd comes in from the Colorado School of Mines, and there's a learning curve, I think, for him. Alex Asparuhov gets hurt towards the end of his high school senior season and misses the spring here, so he's kind of playing catch up, and you just don't know who the punter is going to be. You don't know how good they're going to be, and you don't know what sort of impact that will have until something bad happens. So, and you're also dealing with a new snapper as well, and David Bird coming over from Cal. So there's a lot of newness. I think Talty probably has the highest confidence from the coaching staff right now. But we'll see. And I honestly don't even know what the return situation is right now. We'll kind of have to see. I think there's a lot of guys kind of cycling through right now, and whoever it is in week one, we might not find out until they go out for warmups in Tallahassee.
New holder, new protector. It's weird because overall on special teams, they played a lot of young guys last year. Take a lot of pride in that fact, but none of them are specialists. So that core of that unit, it's going to be very interesting to see early on how they function, whether everything's sort of fluid and on the same page. We'll see. It's one of the biggest unknowns. The return game, to me, you can throw a bunch of names out, Jalen Bachway, Watsir Brooks, the list can go on and on. There's a lot of good candidates. I do wonder how much we're going to see Ryan Williams do that, because he was explosive last year. Not always reliable. Plus, it seemed like he hit the freshman wall at a certain point. So do you want to take that load off of him and say, look, we love what you do. We love the football in your hands. We're just going to do it on offense. So I think maybe we see a little bit less of him. But ultimately, it's going to come down to who can catch the football and protect the football. And then hopefully you can make plays, because, yes, all of this is new, and there's some anxiety that comes along with that. And maybe it's a weak link, possibly. But it wasn't like special teams made a ton of plays last year. Their punting game was great. Field goal kicking barely happened. Return game barely happened. So can you get more positive plays and momentum swings? I think that should be a goal, even if maybe some of the functionality is a little bit shaky. There's an opportunity to sort of advance in that side of the ball.
Yeah. Well, guys, we are recording this on a Tuesday afternoon, just again wrapped up fall practice number 5. It's full steam ahead. I believe there's a scrimmage on this Saturday. We may be back beforehand. If not, we'll be back pretty soon after that. But Mike, Alex, kind of just to wrap it up, put you on the spot here, just looking forward over these next week and a half, what's your one single real quick biggest question mark if you're an Alabama fan's mind, kind of what you want to see, want to hear about, want to be told over this next week and a half?
Keep it simple. It's quarterback. That's the rest of the table is set on this roster. Would I like to see a better running game? Sure. But it's quarterback, and to me, it's Ty looked great in the spring, but in the back of my head, he wasn't going up against everybody on this defense because a lot of this defense was out. How does that first scrimmage sort of look? How much do they challenge him? Can he sort of take the reins? Because the earlier he's named the starting quarterback, the more definitive it is. I think the more confidence you can have in that position.
And to me, it's always injuries this time of year, because you just get to a certain point where it's like you kind of know who players are, like your core group of players on both sides of the ball. And in a lot of cases, like, they're kind of ready to be ready for the season or to get the season going. And you don't want to put them in bubble wrap or put them on ice or whatever, but the last thing you want is the second to last week of August, have a guy go down with a sprained ankle and miss 2 or 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden you're scrambling at the start of the year. So you had that one little injury scare so far with Latsier Brooks, but it doesn't seem like anything major. He's already out of the boot. But, there's been camps in the past. My first camp I covered was Dylan Moses and Trey Sanders in the first week or two, whatever it was, going down. And you just, obviously for the sake of those players, you hope that doesn't happen. But I think Alabama fans obviously hope that there's no injuries. You just kind of want, once you have these competitions relatively settled, like, let's just get to the season healthy, I think is usually the priority by the middle of August.
Yeah. Well, like Mike said, it was a busy week, going to be a busy month and next 6 months, and we'll be here every step of the way. Glad to have you guys back. We'll have this up either Tuesday night or very first thing Wednesday morning. Be sure to like and subscribe and everything and all that more on Bama247. Seems like we're always running a special. We're running another special right now. So make sure you guys get everything that Mike and Alex and I have to offer.
Already.